want to go there?
Wherever you.
What if I don't want to go there?
You're the media expert. Whatever you think.
Okay. I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So I just asked Connor, what should I talk about? And what did you say?
Whatever makes the crowd happy.
Yeah. So tell me what makes you happy. What do you want me to talk about? Come on. Why did you come? Brazil. No, why did you come?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Not where are you from? Why did you come?
Yeah, it's because I'm interested in your role in the reform of the Labour Party.
Okay. All right, why did you come?
Your time with Tony Blair when you were the director of kind of the big.
Okay, so yeah, why did you come? Yeah.
Your past history?
Okay. God, nobody come to be horrible or... Oh, you did?
No, I know there were.
You nodded, you said that. Oh, good, you got a good man. Right, so basically, I'll do a bit of life and times then, and then it'll kind of weave in, okay? Because it's really weird for me being somebody that people like you come in here talk. Because if you'd have said to me, I hate doing that thing when I was your age, right? But when I was your age, if you'd have said to me that one day you'd be kind of, students would want to hear you speak about your life and political parties would want you to go and help them and all the stuff that I now do, or that I'd write 11 books, you know, I said, well, why is that going to happen? What is there in my background that says that's going to happen? Because my dad was a vet. He was from the Hebrides in the west of Scotland. And he was the first of his family to move away from the island at all. And so I went to a very ordinary school in Leicester, whose football team is doing very, very well at the moment. But I do not support Leicester, I support Burnley. We're doing quite well in the lower division. And so I just never thought I'd do anything really kind of that. I was quite happy, I sort of liked my life and all that, but if you just said to me I'd do all these things that I've done, I said, well, why is that going to happen? And the reason I start with that is I think it's really important that whatever you're thinking about doing, I do think that there's lots of difficulties in the world, there's lots of disadvantaged people and what have you, but if you do have opportunities to do stuff, then do it. And I just think that too many people sort of limit their horizons, and they limit their horizons for lots and lots of different reasons. They limit their horizons because they think they're not good enough, and actually, you know what, you find maybe you are. I started out in I went to university, I did languages, I went to Cambridge, I hated it. I developed a drink problem. I went into journalism, where in that era a drink problem was considered an asset. And it was actually, joking apart, it was one of the reasons I got hired, because at the interview panel, the people from the Mirror who were interviewing all the trainees, who wanted to be trainees, we ended up all going out on the RAS, and I promise you, they picked me because I was last man standing, and that's just the way it was. So I became a journalist, I really, really enjoyed it. Even that, I thought, this is a bit weird. Why am I doing this? But you know, now when I go and talk to journalists, to young journalists in journalism colleges and what have you, and they always say, you know, what piece of advice do you have for somebody starting out in journalism? And I always say, don't underestimate the guys above you, but don't overestimate them either. And I hope that doesn't sound arrogant, but I started on a local paper called the Tavistock Times. And so I start day one, and I look at the editor of the Tavistock Times, right, an editor, and I think, God, they must be so special to be the editor, right? And then after a few days, I think, do you know what, I could do that. I could do what they've just done, I could do that. And then when I got into the Daily Mirror, you think, oh my God, I'm on the Daily Mirror, a national newspaper, paper I've read all my life that I've always wanted to work on, and now I'm here. And I'm looking at these reports and thinking, these guys are just incredible. These are the guys I've aspired to be. And I look at them and think, I'm never going to be able to do what they do. And actually, if you kind of just look at them and learn from them and follow them and what have you, you can do it. And then, So I've sort of felt I've gone through life doing that, thinking that there should be no limits to what you can do. Now, of course, there are limits. I mean, I couldn't be a footballer, right? Because I'm not that good at football. But I have played football with Diego Maradona. And I talk about it every single day of my life. I do, honestly, every day of my life. This is the second time I've mentioned it today. I talk about it every day of my life. Because actually, when I was a kid, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a footballer, but I just wasn't good enough. I played with Dunga as well. He's a good player. He learned how to play football just by playing with socks, rolling up socks, and that was the ball. And so you kind of go through life, and I've got 3 kids now, 28, 25, 21, something like that. I'm not very good on ages. The oldest one's working for West Ham United, does data and analytics, all that Billy Bean stuff. I've got another one who's working for a strategy company, but he's also starting his own charity for people who live on the streets, of which there are a hell of a lot more than there used to be. And my daughter's at film school. And people, again, they say to you, would you like your kids to go into politics? And I say, well, I wouldn't mind if they did. But do you know what I really like about the way their lives are going? Is actually they've worked out for themselves that there's loads of different ways to change the world. It's not just about politics. I think if you think about, if you go back through, so I'm 58, right? And the book, you mentioned the Winner's Book. Right, well in the Winner's Book, it's all about kind of great achievers. And mainly I've focused on people I know, people I've interviewed, people I've worked with, people I've worked for, who are alive. But I've picked a few who are dead. Churchill, Lincoln, Nelson Mandela, right? Now, if you think about this period of history, if we say Abraham Lincoln, he was the figure of that period of history, okay? This period of history might be Mandela, but actually, you know what? It might be Steve Jobs. It might be somebody that we don't yet really know about because somebody's percolating a new kind of political philosophy or an idea or a thought or what have you. And the point I'm making is that I just feel that if you have a bit of talent, you work hard, you've got a bit of energy, you kind of do want to do big stuff, I think you can do it. And you shouldn't limit yourself in what you think you're able to do. Now you've got to be true to yourself. Some people are shy, some people get very nervous, some people are all that stuff, right? But I've met so many different people who've kind of done extraordinary things. And I think that one of the things that unites them is a real belief, not necessarily in themselves, as people, as individuals, I'm going to change the world, but actually a real belief that they could and that they can. And I've just felt incredibly lucky to have gone through this rather strange life. Like I say, son of a vet, go to university, didn't do much, got into lots of trouble, developed alcoholism, had a breakdown, just not in good shape, and yet then get into journalism, make my way in journalism, then go into politics, working with Tony Blair, and likewise now, I mean, it's kind of quite weird being me. That whole Malcolm Tucker thing, right? Do you know Malcolm Tucker? The Peter Capaldi guy? I mean, it's just quite weird when you say, well, that's sort of meant to be based on him. And I think, well, it's not like me, but I quite like it. And likewise, now, I've got to be honest, I'm more worried about the state of the world than I was. I don't know whether I'm right to be, but if I think about it, I did a speech in France a couple of weeks ago, and they said, it's a really interesting idea, and I enjoyed doing it. They said, I'd like you to analyse the difference between Tony Blair's in-tray, when he became Prime Minister in 1997, and the in-tray of a world leader today. And Tony Blair, back in 1997, so we get into power, you know, if you say, right, what's the big agenda? The economy, wanted to fix the economy, jobs, get young people back to work, do the New Deal, get more money into the health service, reform schools, make them better. If we had the time and the energy and the space dealing with all that, try and do Northern Ireland, But it was all fairly kind of expectable for what you'd expect a kind of progressive, newly elected leader with a big majority to do. If I look at world leaders today, and I look at the kind of scale of problems, I think this is quite scary. Global terrorism of a sort that we really, even when we were dealing with the IRA, we didn't really contemplate it was going to get that much worse than that, but it has. Climate change, massive issue, and you know, when you look around the world and you see the American election, you kind of think half of those people don't even accept that it exists, and that kind of I find a bit scary and freaky. We've had one global financial crisis, and you know, there might be another, because of the way the Chinese economy is going, and then the whole thing about inequality, which I think is becoming the defining issue of the next period, next generation of politics. The sense that the crash happened and the people who caused it, I think I'm right in saying one guy in America has gone to jail over that whole subprime thing. And yet millions and millions and millions of people around the world have paid the price in terms of, you know, whether it's loss of jobs, loss of homes, cuts to public services, whatever it might be. And that sense that actually the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, I think that's kind of where a lot of political energy is going to go. And then the whole sense, I'm going on from here to Channel 4 to do a thing with Steve Hilton, who used to work for David Cameron, talking about whether politics as we know it is actually broken, whether politics can deliver the sort of changes that people want. And I don't know the answer. But I do think that, as it were, middle-aged old fart speaking, your generation are going to have to find the answers, because I don't sense that actually my generation is necessarily going to be able to adapt to all these changes in the way that we might all want them to and like them to. You look at America now, you look at like the American president, okay, China may become a superpower in the same way, I don't know, but like American president, it's like a really, really, really big deal. And that country, still the richest country in the world, or I think they are going to get overtaken. Militarily, definitely the most powerful. Culturally, in many ways, very, very powerful. And you've got a situation where, okay, I can buy Hillary as president, no doubt about that. But the other party, Donald Trump. And I find it quite scary. I find that quite scary. And then I look at what's happening with us in relation. The reason I'm in Dublin, other than obviously to come here, is tomorrow I'm speaking at an IBEC conference on Brexit. And I worry about that. There you are, you think about historically Europe, a continent kind of defined by millions of people killing each other, and then out of those wars the European Union comes, and okay, it's not perfect, but you know, my lifetime, relatively, Europe has been pretty peaceful, pretty prosperous. And now, for his own kind of, I think, tactical missteps, David Cameron's agreed to this referendum. I'm totally with him on the referendum. I think he's completely cocked up how we've got here. And, you know, I hope we don't come out, but if we do, has a big impact on you. And one of the points I'm going to make in this speech tomorrow to IBEC is this has an impact on you. You don't have a vote, but you do have a say. You do have a say. Hands up here, anybody who doesn't know anybody who lives in the United Kingdom. Right, get on the phone. Get on the phone and you say to them, how you voted in the referendum. If they say they're staying in, thanks, you put the phone down. If they say they're coming out, you have an argument. I'll tell you what I think is really interesting about what's happening in politics at the moment. The people don't believe newspapers like they used to, right? They might get influenced by them at the margins, but I'm amazed at how many people I meet these days who don't even read newspapers, and if they do, it's not because they're kind of consuming the politics, if you like. People don't believe politicians either in the same way. I wish they did, but they don't. And so you've got to ask, who do people believe? Because we have a very, very human belief, a human desire to believe. That's why people have faith and God and all that. I don't, but lots of people do. I believe in my football team. I believe in my kids. I want to believe in them. So who do we believe when we're having a big argument about, you know, something as important as the future of Britain and whether it should be in or out of the European Union. And I think you've got to understand, to understand this and how it sort of shapes modern campaigning, you've got to understand why Facebook is such a big thing. The genius of Facebook is actually a really, really, really simple concept. It's the concept of the friend. It's who we believe each other. We believe our friends. We believe our family sometimes. But we do believe our friends. And I think that these kind of issues, these kind of big debates now, they're going to be shaped as much by what I call face-to-face, person-to-person, friend-to-friend argument and campaign as they are by David Cameron making a big speech, or even Barack Obama coming over on Friday, which he's doing. That is great for the mood. It's great for the fact that you can dominate the news agenda and what have you. But I do honestly believe, if you think about it, you take something like Europe. Let's say you've been reading The Sun or the Daily Mail or the Daily Express or the Daily Star or the Daily Telegraph, any of these kind of vile right-wing Eurosceptic newspapers, right? They have been banging the anti-European drum, not just the last few weeks, but for the last 25, 30 years. If you read that paper and you believe it, there's no way you're an undecided voter, let alone that you're going to vote in. And yet, tons, hundreds of thousands, millions of them are undecided. If you're a Labour supporter, a Tory supporter, a Lib Dem, and you believe your leader, every single leader of the major parties, UKIP accepted, they're all saying vote in. Let's stay. So if everybody believed them and wanted to be led by them, it's a landslide the other way. Newspapers saying this, the politicians saying this, and yet you've got this massive block of undecideds. Now, my point I'm making is you, individually, collectively, you can have an impact on that without having a vote. You know, in the Scottish referendum, one of the most powerful pieces of communication in the whole thing was when there was a whole series of events. The biggest one was in Trafalgar Square, but it was kind of please don't go. It was English people and Welsh people saying, please don't go. Can't remember if there was any in Northern Ireland. I think there must have been. But I can remember the ones in Cardiff and in London. Please don't go. And I do think, with so many people undecided, you can have an impact. So I'm sort of asking you, please, try and do that. I've become obsessed about doing it. Partly because I wrote a piece in the Financial Times at the weekend and I said, this is how this new campaign is going to work. And I'll tell you, I wrote a blog about this the other day. So if you go on my website, it's the last blog I wrote. I was going to a football match on Saturday. Burnley were playing at Birmingham. I get on the train. I'm sitting there just minding my own business. And you may know that Millwall fans have a bit of a reputation. My whole carriage filled up with Millwall fans who were going to Coventry. I thought, oh my God, oh no. Head down, read, play on my laptop, whatever. One of them spotted me and really loudly goes, oh my God, it's Alastair Campbell. And he gave me this kind of look. And I discovered his nickname was the Mole Killer. So I've got this guy, the Mole Killer, looking at me. The next guy, I got to know these guys really well. He was called Paddy the Arab. He was half Irish, half Egyptian. Look him up on Twitter, @Paddy the Arab. So Paddy the Arab, he comes over and he looked a little bit aggressive, but he sat right down next to me. He says, right, I want to talk to you. He goes, in or out? I said, in. Why? Persuade me. So I did. I got this out. I said, you know this leaflet? Have you heard about this leaflet that's gone to every house in the country? Have you had yours yet? No, not yet, says Paddy the Arab. I says, have a read. He sat down, this Millwall fan, on the train to the match. He read it, cover to cover. And he put it down at the end. He said, yeah, quite interesting that. Quite interesting that. Read my blog about what happened next. Paddy the Arab has become the Remain campaign ambassador to Millwall Football Club. Right? This is the new campaigning. It's mindset. It's mindset. How many people here support Arsenal? You know, every room you go in the world, you find supporters of Arsenal, Liverpool, Man United. Celtic? Yeah. Rangers? Burnley? It's me. Arsene Wenger. In the winner's book, it's one of my favourite bits of the whole book. He said this thing, I just think is such a brilliant insight for the kind of modern world of, you know, where we're bombarded by media and all the rest of it. He said, we've gone from a vertical world to a horizontal world. In a vertical world, leaders lead. They make decisions, they announce the decisions, they go down through the system. In a horizontal world, you're bombarded 24/7 by other people's opinions. So there's somebody there tweeting everything I'm saying, probably saying, Alastair Campbell droning on about a load of old rubbish, God, this is shit, da 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 da. Right? Nothing I can do about it. I can just talk. I can't control what he's going to say about it. And Wenger's point, like, you know when they lost to, who was it they lost recently? To Swansea, I think it was. By the time, let's assume Wenger goes to bed about midnight, right? And let's say he gets up at 7 o'clock. I checked this on the whole Twitter thing. How many tweets do you think there were about Wenger and his role in that result by the time he got up in the morning? 732,000. That's a lot of noise. That's a lot of horizontalism coming at you. All that noise saying, you're rubbish, you should have done this, Wenger out, blah, 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 blah. And what he said was, the only way to deal with it is to ignore it. And here's the other thing, back to, I don't know how you get kind of confidence in yourself, but all you can control, this goes for you, goes for me, goes for politicians, goes for business people, goes for anybody. All you can control is what you do and what you say about what you do. Everything else just kind of, it just happens out there. You've got to kind of focus on yourself and your own role within something. And I'll shut up in a minute and we'll have a sort of proper discussion, but just to kind of, you know, go to what you guys were asking about. The thing about, when Tony Blair asked me to work for him, I mean, I've always been Labour, okay? Find it a bit difficult at the moment, but I'll always be Labour. I'll always be Labour. But when Tony Blair asked me to work for him, there was a really big part of me that said, you know what, I don't think this is right for me, and I'm not sure it's right for you. Why not? Well, you know I've had my breakdown. That was about pressure. I cracked. This is going to be more pressure. Why might I not crack again? And he said, well, I don't think you will. And, you know, give it a go. And I said, well, you know, the other thing is I know my mind, and I know I've got a very strong temper. I've got a big ego. I've got all that stuff. He said, well, I don't care. And so we go and do I'll tell you the moment when it took me a month to say yes, because it sort of happened now and I'm so closely associated with Tony, people assume it was all sort of, you know, oh, they must have always been right, you know, that was always going to happen. It was a month before I said yes. I said no several times, it was a month before I said yes. And the thing that made me go for it was, we were in France on holiday. Tony had a kind of feeling that I was having a bit of a wobble, so he just sort of appeared with his wife, his kids and his mother-in-law. They were on holiday in the west of France, we were over in the middle, they just appeared. And he was trying to talk me into it. And the thing that got me over the line was when he said, look, don't tell anybody this, but one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm going to change the Labour Party constitution so that we actually remove the things in that constitution where it has words that we don't actually believe. Now, it may sound archaic and arcane, right? But at the time, this is the whole thing about the old clause 4 in Labour's constitution. At the time, it was a massive thing. And what I liked about it was bold. And I think that the big, bold things are the ones you really got to try and do. So if I look back, we reformed the Labour Party because we've been losing election after election after election. And in a democracy, you know, if you keep losing elections, there comes a point where you have to kind of listen to people and say, you're sort of saying we ought to change a bit. And so we had to do that. And the reform, New Labour, modernisation, was basically a way of saying, right, unless we change that, in opposition, we have to change the party as a way of showing the public that we're capable of change, that it fits within modern values that we really, really believe in, and then here's where we tell them we'll try and apply them to the world going forward if they elect us. And that's what happened. And along the way, good stuff, bad stuff, difficult times, easy times. I've got no doubt somebody will ask about Iraq. But for me, I've got to tell you, one of the reasons I do come back here so often, for me, one of the biggest parts of the whole thing was Northern Ireland. And I mean, your generation, you'll know about it, but I guess already, for a lot of you, it's history. It's a different world. But that was changed because we decided it was worth putting in the effort and the energy and all the late nights and all the flying around the place and all the rest of it. And I'll close on this before we open up. I always think it's interesting when you come into a public building like this. A few years ago, not that many years ago, if I was a smoker, which I used to be, and I was up here, and I lit up a cigarette, there might be loads of non-smokers in the room, but there's nothing you're going to do about it, because that was the culture then. Now, there'll be people here who smoke. It'll kill you, by the way. But, you know, the people here who smoke, none of you are thinking about lighting up a cigarette now. When you get in a car, all right, you might be thinking you want to, but you're not going to do it. When you get in a car, you put on a seatbelt. That's change. How many people here have seen the film Milk? You know the film Milk? Is it a good film? Brilliant film. The reason I love that film is about a gay rights campaigner. It starts with him being beaten up in the streets of San Francisco, because that's what happens to gay rights, people who are openly gay at that time in California. And it ends, he's on the steps of Congress, he's an elected representative, and he's just taken the first piece of gay rights legislation through successfully. What is really interesting about it, and why I love that film as a film about campaigning, is that there's an arc within it. You don't know when the change came. You can't. The change didn't come when they passed the legislation. That was the product of the change. The change, when I mentioned the smoking thing, for example, that was actually your government, the Irish government, that did that first. We were bold as a government, we did lots of bold things, but actually when we had the idea about first maybe doing that, even Tony Blair was saying, well, listen, the Irish are doing it, let's see how it goes there. Because actually the idea of telling lots of working class Labour supporters, by the way, you're not going to be able to smoke in the pub anymore, that was quite a big thing. So the Irish did it, it went fine, and now it's kind of gone around the world. Most developed parts of the world now, you won't see smoking in places like this. So change comes when people make change come. So Harvey Milk and those gay rights campaigner, they decided to make change. Nobody knew who they were. At the start, he wasn't a representative in Congress. He was just somebody who decided to try and do something and make change. This idea that only politicians can make change, it's a nonsense. Anybody can make change if they decide to do it, if they care enough, if they decide that's what I'm going to get involved in. One of the things I do now, I'm an ambassador for a mental health campaign, Time to Change. The reason I love this the campaign doing that is because we're not fighting for services, we're not fighting for money, even though we'd like, and we do sort of campaign for better services, but actually what we're about is changing the way that people think. We're making change happen in the way people think about mental health and mental illness. So whether it's poverty, inequality, climate change, whatever it might be, you can make change happen. You don't have to be a politician. It'd be great if some of you decide that you will become politicians. How many might? A few. That's okay, that's good. Yeah? No? Oh, no. That was a big no, that was. So, yes, life is there to be enjoyed. Have a few drinks, Snapchat, Instagram, all that stuff, fine. But actually, I reckon we all have within us the ability to do big, bold and wonderful things. And I think we should all go out and try and do them. Thank you very much. Okay, see ya.